Chosen one, you've noticed it, haven't you? That strange pattern where friendships that once felt solid just crumble, where people who promised loyalty suddenly distance themselves, where group chats go silent when you enter and invitations mysteriously stop coming. And the most confusing part, you haven't changed who you are. You're still kind, still caring, still showing up. Yet somehow you're walking alone. Let me tell you something that might shake you. This isn't happening to you. It's happening for you. If you've felt the sting of unexplained rejection, if you've wondered why maintaining friendships feels like holding water in your bare hands, if you've questioned whether something is fundamentally wrong with you, listen closely. Because what I'm about to reveal will completely transform how you see your isolation. The truth is brutal, but it's liberating. Chosen ones aren't meant to keep friends the way ordinary people do. Your assignment is too critical, your frequency too elevated, and your purpose too threatening to the kingdom of darkness for you to have the comfort of casual companionship. You see, while everyone else is collecting friends like trophies, you're being stripped down, refined, and positioned. And that process, it requires a loneliness that most people will never understand. If this resonates with your soul, do me a favor right now, hit that like button and subscribe, because this channel exists to speak directly to the isolated, the misunderstood, the ones walking a path few can comprehend. And if this message is already shifting something inside you, consider leaving a super thanks. Your support allows us to keep creating content that validates your experience and strengthens your resolve. Now let's dive into why your friendships keep falling apart, and why that's actually evidence of your calling. The prophet Elijah sat alone under a juniper tree, isolated and exhausted, believing he was the only one left. Moses spent 40 years in a desert, separated from everything familiar. Jesus himself withdrew from the crowds, often retreating to lonely places to pray. Do you see the pattern? Chosen ones don't lose friends by accident. You lose them by divine design. Because the moment God marks you for something greater, he begins the sacred work of separation. And that separation, it starts with the people you thought would stand beside you forever. There's a spiritual phenomenon happening inside you that most people cannot detect with their natural eyes, but they absolutely feel it in their spirit. Your frequency is shifting. Your vibration is elevating, and just like a radio station, when you change frequencies, you can no longer transmit on the same wavelength you used to. This isn't metaphorical, it's spiritual physics. When God begins activating your calling, he starts rewiring your internal circuitry. Your interests change. Your tolerance for superficiality evaporates. Your discernment sharpens. Conversations that once entertained you now feel hollow. Environments that once energized you now drain you. Activities that once brought joy now feel like distractions. And here's what's really happening. You're being tuned to heaven's frequency. Romans 12:2 says, "Be transformed by the renewing of your mind." That word, transformed, in Greek is metamorpho, the same word used to describe a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. It's not a minor adjustment. It's a complete reconstruction of your nature. But here's the problem. Your friends are still operating on the old frequency. They're still entertained by gossip, still energized by drama, still invested in temporary pleasures and surface-level connections. And when you stop resonating with that frequency, they feel the disconnect, even if they can't articulate it. They'll say you've changed. They'll accuse you of being too deep, or too serious, or too spiritual. They'll mock your new boundaries, question your new priorities, and resent your new perspective. But what they're really reacting to is the light that's now exposing the darkness they're comfortable with. Jesus said in John 3:20, "Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light, for fear that their deeds will be exposed." Your very presence, without saying a word, becomes a mirror that reflects what people are avoiding in themselves. You're not losing friends because you're doing something wrong. You're losing friends because you're doing something right. You're ascending, and not everyone is called to that altitude. Some people are assigned to sea level, and that's okay. But you were built for the mountaintop. And the higher you climb, the fewer people can breathe in that atmosphere. The air gets thinner, the temperature drops, the view becomes clearer, but the companionship becomes scarcer. This is the frequency shift, and it's non-negotiable for the chosen. Let's talk about something uncomfortable. Your growth makes people confront their stagnation. Your discipline highlights their complacency. Your faith exposes their doubt. And instead of being inspired by your transformation, many people feel threatened by it. Why? Because your evolution is a living testimony that change is possible, and that terrifies people who've made peace with staying the same. Think about it. When you stop participating in gossip, the gossip circle feels judged, even if you never said a word. When you stop drinking or partying, the party crowd feels abandoned, even though you just made a personal choice. When you start prioritizing prayer over social events, religious people feel convicted, even though you're just answering your call. Your light doesn't have to be aggressive to be offensive. It just has to shine. Matthew 5:14-16 says, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Notice, it doesn't say your light will be celebrated. It says it cannot be hidden. And anything that cannot be hidden will inevitably disturb those who prefer darkness. Here's the brutal truth. Some people befriended the old you, the you that made them feel better about themselves, the you that participated in their level of consciousness, the you that didn't challenge their worldview or lifestyle. But the new you, the awakened you, the purposed you, that version threatens the very foundation of their comfort zone. They don't want you to be free because your freedom reminds them of their bondage. They don't want you to be healed because your healing highlights their wounds. They don't want you to be elevated because your elevation reveals their stagnation. And instead of doing the hard work of growing alongside you, it's easier to label you as changed, to distance themselves, to paint you as the problem. It's a tale as old as time. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery. Why? Because his dreams threatened their mediocrity. David's brothers mocked him at the battlefront. Why? Because his courage exposed their cowardice. Jesus' own hometown rejected him. Why? Because familiarity breeds contempt, and his anointing disrupted their comfortable narrative about who he was supposed to be. If you're losing friends on this journey, check your light. If it's shining brighter, you're on the right path. The right people will be attracted to that light. The wrong people will run from it, and that's called divine separation. Here's a truth that will either liberate you or offend you. God isolates who he's about to elevate. He separates who he's about to promote. He withdraws who he's about to anoint. And that isolation isn't punishment, it's preparation. Every major biblical figure who carried a significant assignment experienced a season of isolation. Abraham was called to leave his family and everyone he knew. Joseph was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and imprisoned for years. Moses spent decades in a desert before encountering the burning bush. David hid in caves while running from Saul. Paul went into Arabia for 3 years after his conversion. Why does God do this? Because isolation removes distraction. It silences competing voices. It creates dependency on him alone, and it protects you from the voices that would abort your assignment. Before it's fully developed, you cannot birth what God has placed inside you while surrounded by people who knew the old you. You cannot step into your destiny while clinging to relationships that keep you tethered to your past. You cannot walk in your full authority while seeking approval from people who don't recognize your calling. Isolation is God's incubator. In the wilderness, God has your undivided attention. There's no social media to numb you, no friends to validate you, no distractions to delay you. It's just you and God, and in that sacred space, he rewires your identity, reshapes your perspective, and rebuilds your foundation. Hosea 2:14 says, "Therefore I am now going to allure her. I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her." God allures you into isolation not to harm you, but to speak to you in ways he couldn't when you were surrounded by noise. The wilderness is where God downloads strategy. It's where he reveals secrets. It's where he prepares you for the weight of what's coming. Because here's what most people don't realize. Your assignment is bigger than your current capacity. Your calling requires a version of you that doesn't exist yet, and isolation is where that version is forged. You think you're losing friends, but God is removing distractions. You think you're being rejected, but God is protecting your focus. You think you're walking alone, but God is positioning you for a table he's preparing, where the right people, the aligned people, the called people will eventually sit. Your isolation isn't a sign that you're forgotten. It's evidence that you're being fashioned for something the crowd can't comprehend. Trust the process. As a chosen one of the most painful gifts you'll receive is heightened discernment. And I say painful because once your spiritual eyes are opened, you can't unsee what you've seen. You start recognizing hidden motives, sensing disingenuous energy, and detecting spiritual misalignment in people you once trusted. And that gift, it will cost you friendships. Discernment shows you who's really for you and who's just around you. It reveals who celebrates your wins and who secretly resents them. It exposes who's a friend in public but a Judas in private. And once you see it, you can't pretend you don't. Proverbs 25 says, "The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out." As a chosen one, God gives you insight, the ability to draw out what people are hiding, even from themselves. You'll feel when someone's energy is off. You'll sense when a conversation is laced with jealousy. You'll know when someone is gathering information to use against you later. And you'll recognize when a friendship is transactional, conditional, or rooted in control rather than genuine love. This discernment isn't suspicion, it's spiritual intelligence, and it's one of the primary reasons you can't keep friends. Because while everyone else is blinded by familiarity, charm, or history, you're seeing the truth. And the truth is often isolating. People will call you paranoid. They'll say you're overthinking. They'll accuse you of being judgmental or distant. But what they don't understand is that you're not operating from suspicion. You're operating from revelation. And here's the hard part. Sometimes the people your discernment exposes are people you genuinely love. Family members, longtime friends, mentors, people who've been in your life for years. But longevity doesn't equal loyalty, and history doesn't guarantee alignment. 1 Corinthians 2:14-15 says, "The person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but the person with the Spirit makes judgments about all things." You're making judgments, spiritual assessments that others can't make because they're not operating with the same level of spiritual sight. And when you start making decisions based on what your spirit discerns, rather than what your emotions want, people fall away. Not because you're cutting them off maliciously, but because you're honoring what God is showing you. Discernment is a divine defense mechanism. It protects your peace, guards your purpose, and preserves your anointing. Yes, it will make you lonely, but it will also keep you safe. Here's something most people won't tell you. Some of the friendships you're mourning were never meant to be permanent. They were soul ties, spiritual connections designed for a specific season, a specific lesson, a specific chapter of your life. And now that the season has shifted, the tie is being severed. Not every person is meant to go with you into your next level. Some people were assigned to your past to teach you what you needed to learn. Others were placed in your life to reveal what you needed to see about yourself, about them, or about God. And once that assignment is complete, the relationship naturally dissolves. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens." That includes relationships. There's a season to connect and a season to separate, a time to hold on and a time to let go. But here's where it gets tricky. Soul ties feel permanent. They feel deep. They carry history, shared experiences, emotional investment. So when they end, it feels like betrayal, like loss, like something went terribly wrong. But what if nothing went wrong? What if the relationship fulfilled its divine purpose? And now it's time to release it? Think about the Israelites leaving Egypt. They had been in bondage for 430 years. Egypt was familiar. It was all they knew. But when God called them out, He didn't just lead them out of physical slavery. He severed their soul ties to that place, to that identity, to those limitations. And guess what? Many of them wanted to go back, not because Egypt was better, but because the soul tie was still active. The same thing happens in your friendships. You outgrow people, but the soul tie keeps you emotionally tethered. You know the relationship is no longer healthy, aligned, or purposeful, but you stay because of history. You tolerate disrespect because of loyalty. You sacrifice your peace because of guilt. But God is saying, it's time to cut the tie. 2 Corinthians 6:14 warns, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? A yoke is a soul tie, a binding connection. And when you're yoked to the wrong people, you can't move forward freely. Some friendships were beautiful for a season but toxic for your destiny. Some people were blessings in your past but burdens in your future. And recognizing that doesn't make you cold. It makes you obedient. You're not losing friends. You're being untied from assignments that have expired so you can be bound to the relationships God has prepared for your future. Let go. There's a weight that comes with being chosen. A spiritual gravity that most people simply cannot bear. And when your friendships start crumbling, it's often because people can't handle the weight you carry. They can't handle your depth. They can't handle your intensity. They can't handle the seriousness of your walk with God. They can't handle the spiritual warfare you're constantly navigating. They can't handle the emotional and mental load that comes with your calling. So they leave, not because they don't care, but because they're not built for it. Jesus experienced this firsthand. In the Garden of Gethsemane, during his darkest hour, he asked his closest friends, Peter, James, and John, to stay awake and pray with him, but they fell asleep 3 times. They simply couldn't bear the weight of that moment with him. Luke 22:45 says, when he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. They weren't being malicious. They were just incapable of holding the weight he was carrying. And that's what happens to you. People mean well. They want to support you. They say they'll be there. But when the weight gets heavy, when the spiritual battles intensify, when the assignment becomes more demanding, when your life stops being relatable, they tap out. Not because they're bad people, but because they're not called to carry what you're carrying. Galatians 6:2 says, carry each other's burdens. But verse 5 says, each one should carry their own load. There's a difference between a burden, something meant to be shared, and a load, something assigned specifically to you. Your calling is your load, and only you and God can carry it. When people exit your life, it's often because they've mistaken your load for a burden they're supposed to help with. But when they realize the intensity, the sacrifice, the cost of being close to someone carrying what you're carrying, they back away. And you have to let them, because trying to lighten your load to keep people comfortable will abort your assignment. Trying to tone down your intensity to maintain friendships will dilute your impact. Trying to make your calling more palatable will compromise your obedience. You were chosen to carry weight, not to be liked. You were called to bear a mantle, not to collect companions. And the sooner you accept that your assignment requires a level of solitude that others don't experience, the sooner you'll stop taking the exits personally. Your weight is your glory. Your isolation is your preparation. And the ones who are truly meant to walk with you, they won't be intimidated by your load. They'll be honored to stand beside you while you carry it. Here's a perspective shift that might change everything. What if the friendships you're losing aren't losses at all? What if God is deliberately removing people to protect you from spiritual contamination? The truth is, not everyone who exits your life is an enemy. Some of them are good people, kind, fun, well-meaning, but they're spiritually misaligned with where God is taking you. And if they stayed, their influence, however subtle, would contaminate your focus, compromise your standards, or delay your destiny. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Notice it doesn't say bad people, it says bad company. You can be surrounded by good people who are bad company for your assignment. Think about it. Their unbelief could infect your faith. Their complacency could slow your momentum. Their fear could sabotage your courage. Their limited thinking could cap your vision. Not intentionally, but spiritually. So God, in his love and wisdom, removes them, not to punish you, but to protect you. It's like when a surgeon removes healthy tissue surrounding a tumor to ensure the cancer doesn't spread. The tissue isn't diseased, but its proximity to disease makes it a liability. Some friendships are like that, not toxic in themselves, but too close to influences that could hinder what God is doing in you. Proverbs 13:20 warns, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Your companions shape your trajectory, and if your companions aren't pursuing God with the same intensity, hunger, and surrender that you are, they'll inevitably pull you toward mediocrity, even if unintentionally. This is why God isolates you before he elevates you. He's creating a quarantine zone around your calling. He's establishing a firewall around your anointing. He's building a hedge of protection around your focus. And yes, it feels lonely. Yes, it feels extreme. But it's necessary, because the enemy knows that if he can't stop you directly, He'll use the people closest to you to distract, discourage, or derail you. He'll send well-meaning friends who question your choices. He'll use loved ones who guilt you for your boundaries. He'll plant voices that sound rational but are spiritually off. And God, knowing this, removes access. Psalm 1:1 says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers." Your blessing is directly connected to your separation from certain influences. So if God is clearing your circle, don't mourn it, honor it. He's protecting something in you that's more valuable than any friendship. He's shielding a seed that's more precious than any companionship. Trust his removal as much as you trust his provision. Now, here's the hope in all of this. You're not being isolated forever. You're being repositioned. God isn't removing people to leave you alone. He's removing the wrong people to make room for the right ones. Your true tribe is being assembled, but they're not coming until you're ready. And ready doesn't just mean spiritually mature. It means emotionally detached from the relationships God has already released. You can't receive your divine connections while you're still clinging to expired ones. You can't attract your kingdom relationships while you're still begging people to stay who were assigned to leave. You can't step into aligned community while you're still tolerating misaligned company. Psalm 68:6 says, God sets the lonely in families. Notice it says sets, meaning he arranges it. He orchestrates it, he assigns it. Your real family, your spiritual family, your purpose-driven tribe is being set by God, not by social proximity or shared history. But here's what most chosen ones miss: the tribe God is preparing for you operates at the frequency you're becoming, not the frequency you used to be. They're not impressed by your potential. They recognize your anointing. They're not drawn to your personality. They're aligned with your purpose. These are people who will sharpen you, not pacify you, challenge you, not coddle you, pray with you, not gossip about you, celebrate your growth, not resent it, walk in the same level of faith, discipline, and surrender that you do. But they won't show up until the old circle is completely cleared. Think about Abraham. God told him to leave his country, his people, and his father's household. Only after he obeyed that separation did God give him a new identity, a new land, and eventually a son of promise. The blessing was on the other side of the leaving. Think about Ruth. She had to leave Moab, leave her family, leave everything familiar to follow Naomi into the unknown. And it was in that act of radical separation that she walked into her destiny, meeting Boaz, becoming part of the lineage of Jesus. Your tribe is coming, but they're waiting for you to fully let go. Hebrews 11:8 says, by faith Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. You're in that even though phase. You don't see the tribe yet. You don't know where this is leading, but you're walking by faith, trusting that God is assembling something better than what you lost. And when they arrive, your true tribe, you'll realize why everyone else had to leave. You'll see why the seats had to be emptied. You'll understand why God was so intentional about clearing your circle. Because the people he's bringing won't just be friends. They'll be kingdom family, covenant connections, divine alignments, and they'll be worth the wait. So here we are, the brutal truth laid bare. Chosen ones can't keep friends because the path you're walking isn't designed for crowds. It's designed for the committed, the called, the courageous few who are willing to walk alone when necessary. But let me reframe this loneliness for you. It's not empty, it's sacred. Sacred loneliness is where you discover who you are beyond people's opinions. It's where your identity solidifies, not in what others say about you, but in what God says about you. It's where your faith stops being borrowed and becomes your own. It's where your worship becomes authentic because there's no audience to perform for. In sacred loneliness, you learn to hear God's voice above all other voices. You learn to trust his timing over people's expectations. You learn to walk in obedience even when it doesn't make sense to anyone else. This is where Moses met God at the burning bush. This is where Elijah heard the still small voice. This is where Jesus prayed in Gethsemane. This is where Paul received revelation in Arabia. Your loneliness isn't a void, it's a sanctuary. Isaiah 54:1 says, sing, barren woman, you who never bore a child, because more are the children of the desolate woman than of her who has a husband. The desolate season, the lonely season, is actually the most fruitful. It's where God births things in you that crowds could never produce. So stop apologizing for your isolation. Stop feeling guilty for your boundaries. Stop shrinking to make others comfortable. Stop chasing people who were never meant to stay. Embrace the sacred loneliness. Walk it with dignity. Honor it as the training ground it is. Because on the other side of this season, you won't just have friends, you'll have purpose. You won't just have community, you'll have kingdom impact. You won't just have companionship, you'll have a legacy that outlives you. And when the assignment is complete, when the mantle is fully worn, when the calling is fully walked out, you'll look back on this lonely season and realize it wasn't punishment. It was preparation. It was protection. It was the refining fire that forged you into the chosen one you were always meant to be. So stand tall, walk boldly, trust deeply. You're not losing friends, you're gaining destiny. And that chosen one is worth every lonely step. If this message has awakened something in you, share it with another chosen one who needs to hear it. Subscribe, leave a super thanks if you're able, and remember, your isolation is not your disqualification. It's your invitation into something greater. Now go walk in that truth.